Hello, hi everyone. Thank you for switching and tuning into this channel today. My name is Salima and I am your host for today. Welcome to Crown Beauty and Cosmetics, which is the name of my business, and I am the director. So I just want to thank you for switching to this channel. If this is the first time you've come across this channel, I want to say please stay with us. You will not be disappointed. I've got a lot to go through today, and that's a picture of myself there, bracing myself with a seatbelt because we have a heavy topic to discuss today, one which is very close and dear to my heart. It is actually the core of who I am. Now, just to give you a gist, before I even start the topic, I just want to say please feel free to support my business. It's called Crown Cosmetics on Amazon. So I sell cosmetics, so that includes lipstick, lip liners, lip gloss, and I also sell cultural earrings like African map earrings and so on. So please feel free to go on Amazon and support my business. Okay, so this topic is so close to my heart. It is actually at the core of who I am. Okay, so if you are anything like me or anything remotely like any Black woman or Black person living in the diaspora, and you've been away from Africa, you've not lived in Africa for a long time, there is actually a sense of disconnect from the continent. So just a brief background. Say for instance, right, I moved to the United Kingdom when I was 16, so I was practically a child. And of course, when you moved with your parents, you have to focus on studies and just making here your life. But at the back of your mind, you're so much aware of the foundation that Africa's offered you, and what life was like, how it is so how it is very different compared to living anywhere else, whether you're living in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, or Europe, in my case, in the United Kingdom. So there is there can be a disconnect because you've not lived in the continent for a while. I've been a couple of times, back to Africa. So there's so much that we don't really know, and there's so much that's not been taught to us during our school years about Africa, our contribution to mankind, to humanity, to the world in general. So there's so much we don't know. So this topic, that's why I said it's really close to my heart today, because as a diasporan living in the United Kingdom, as any other diasporan living outside of Africa, there's actually a disconnect, and as you try to assimilate to the Western culture and the Western way of life, you start to question who you are and the significance of yourself, and what you can do to improve the lives of the people living in the continent. Okay, so, and you want to promote social justice, you want to promote human rights and all those things that we are so much familiar about. Okay, so that's why this topic is so important to me, talking about Africa. So I just want this to be an open dialogue. So please feel free to make positive comments or your thoughts and suggestion about what we can do um, collectively as a people from Africa. Okay, so the topic we're going to choose, what we're discussing today, is about African leaders. You ready? So African leaders have actually been emerging in the continent. Well, they've always had good leaders in Africa and some not so good. But lately, I have been so impressed with African leaders. For once in a lifetime, they are speaking with one accord. They are talking about unity. They are talking about uniting Africa as a continent, uniting Africa as a whole. It is so important and so significant in this time in our life to be able to have leaders who are coming together, who are working hard to unite Africa. And I must tell you, I've been very impressed with them, and I hope you are as well. So Africa as a continent is actually rich in mineral, in resources. Um, is actually a wealthy continent. So from the west coast of Africa, down to the south of Africa, and all the way to the east, and up north of Africa, and of course Central Africa. So Africa is really wealthy in minerals reserve. I mean, I'm sure everyone will agree that the DRC, Congo, Congo Brazzaville, and Congo Kinshasa is actually one of the richest places in Africa. And of course, there are other places in the continents, for instance, Nigeria, which have a really wealthy oil reserves. And then you come to Sierra Leone, it's got diamonds. We've got bauxite, rutile, loads of minerals there. And then you come down here to Angola, again, another oil reserve, plenty of oil and diamonds as well, and wildlife is just rich in culture. All the way to Zambia, these countries which are landlocked, and so on, and South Africa, going further down, Malawi, and so on. So there's actually a lot to Africa in terms of its wealth and its reserve. And as African living in the diaspora, it's just so nice to know that this continent is actually being responsible for humanity. You don't realize how much we owe to Africa until you actually, get to a point in life when you realize that after living in the Western world for so long, that all the minerals are actually, they come from Africa. And not only is that, but Africa is the mother of humanity. So this is where life begins. This is the mother of civilization, from the ancient pyramid, which up till this day they still cannot replicate, to all the gold mines in South Africa and Ghana, and the diamonds, and we can go on and on about the natural reserves and minerals. And of course, do you know that there's actually a gold mountain in Congo, for instance, where people are mining gold? There's a mountain full of gold. So there's so much to Africa that Africa has to offer. And I think for certain time, some of us were not really appreciative of the continent, but now we realize that this is the Africa is actually the mother of humanity. So kudos to all Africans. So as you can see, for once in our lifetime, we are experiencing and seeing African leaders coming together, uniting and speaking with one voice, occupying the world stage, bringing their own seat at the table when Africa has not been offered a seat. So for a while, my favorite leader has been Paul Kagame of Rwanda. He is not shy away from actually speaking to the West about being vocal about the hypocrisy, and calling him a dictator, and telling him, lecturing him about democracy. And Kagame has always been said it respectfully to them that the least people that should talk to us about democracy is the West. Because if any people have fought for human rights, it is Africans. We fought to be redeemed from slavery and colonization. So Kagame has been very vocal. I'm actually quite impressed with him. Not just that vocal to the West, but also improving the lives of the people in Rwanda, bringing Rwandans together. And I think that's something so inspiring. Yeah, so in the past, as you know, African leaders have always echoed the sentiment of Pan-Africanism. So African leaders in the past have always talked about uniting Africa. So the purpose of it was because prior to colonization, Africa was one people. We were free to travel and trade with one another. Okay? And then once the European leaders, the colonizer got together in Berlin and decide to divide Africa into small chunks of countries, making it so impossible for the countries to survive on its own when you have to be up against power countries like the USA, for instance, like China or like the European Union. So it was difficult. So what they did as well was to make sure that the francophone countries, people who were once in colonies of French, had little countries under them that speak French. So the Europeans decided this. And then you have the Anglophone countries, people who were once under the British colonies, speaking English, the Portuguese speaking Portuguese countries, and of course the Spanish speaking Spanish, and then the Italian speaking Italian. So, for instance, with the Anglophone countries, you'll have countries like South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and so on. And then you'll have people from the Portuguese colony, such as Angola, Mozambique, you know, that still they have still that ties with the former colonial masters. And then, of course, the French colony like Congo, Guinea, and Ivory Coast, and so on. So it was actually impossible for Africa to be united. It was divided in a way that it would be impossible for us to unite, to become one people, one continent, and speaking with one voice. Because to start with, if Portuguese cannot understand English and English cannot understand French or French cannot understand Spanish, how are we going to ever come together? But these leaders from the past, people like Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, and the likes of it. So Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara and so on, the likes of these people actually recognize that after colonization, it is actually impossible. It should be possible for Africa to come together to speak with one voice, so that the continent will never be colonized again by anyone whatsoever, because this is so important for our future generation, for our children. So they were all speaking with one voice. People like Marcus Garvey, actually, so really good scholar, will always talk about the Pan-African vision and always think is for Africa to be strong, to continue to survive, it is significant that we come together. And there are people like Gaddafi who echo the same sentiment. And then there's Kwame Nkrumah, and then there's Thomas Sankara. But each time a leader has emerged in Africa and speak about togetherness, about unity, about us retaining our resources, they end up being assassinated. And most of the time, it's actually in collusion with the West that these things happen. We know what happened in Libya with Gaddafi, and of course Kwame Nkrumah was trampled over. I'm not actually sure if Kwame Nkrumah is still is dead, because Kwame Nkrumah survived 5 assassination attempts, and there was a saying that Nkrumah never dies. So I hope his soul moves on, that he never dies. And of course Thomas Sankara, who had such a good vision about Africa, and he was betrayed as well and killed. So each time African leaders have spoken about uniting Africa, it's never a voice about destroying another continent or another people. It's all about uniting Africa and empowering Africans so that we can um trade within ourselves. We can have our resources, we can retain our resources, we can educate our children. Every time there's this visionary, and then all of a sudden things like this happen, there's an assassination attempt. So I think for a while, most African leaders would probably be being quiet and not vocal about this issue, because I don't think anyone wants to lose their life. So especially what Kwame Nkrumah said, during the Ghana independence. Because if you already don't know, now you know, Ghana was the first country in Africa to actually regain their independence. And he said this to his people. He says, from now on today, we must change our attitudes and our minds. We must realize that from now on, we are no longer a colonial, but free and independent people. But also, I pointed out that that also entails hard work. That new Africa is ready to fight his own battles and show that, after all, the black man or black woman is capable of managing his own affairs. We're going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, that we are prepared to lay our foundation, our own Africa personality. As I said to the assembly a few minutes ago, I made a point that we are going to create our own Africa personality and identity. It is the only way we can show the world that we're ready for our own battles. And also, he went on to say that the independence of Ghana is meaningless until the entire Africa is independent. So I love Kwame Nkrumah's vision. It's not just looking at Ghana and saying, oh, okay, my country is free, I don't care anymore. It's like, oh, no. Our independence means nothing if our brothers and sisters, don't forget, Africans, we are so related, you'll be surprised. You will find people from Accra in Ivory Coast or in Togo that are even speaking the same language. I'll find people in other parts of Africa that speak the same language as the language you speak in Sierra Leone. So we're so related. It just says no. It will be meaningless if our brothers are not free as well, if they are not liberated. It will be meaningless. So I love his vision for independence Africa, but he also had this vision beyond that, not to just Africa be independent, but for Africa to come together, to unite, to have a united state of Africa. Can you imagine a united state of Africa? So once that dream, once Nkrumah and the likes of it were assassinated, or they were dead, they were killed, it's like that dream of Pan-Africanism died. I know growing up, for sure, I never heard about having Africa together, uniting Africa together. That dream died, but I know that growing up in a country as Sierra Leone, it was actually in Freetown, it was a melting point of all this other different nationality. Because in Freetown, where residing in Freetown, were formerly enslaved people from America, Nova Scotia, everywhere that wanted to come back to Africa to start their life in Africa. So for me, it's like when I meet other African people, there's some sense of familiarity. Like, oh, you feels like somebody I would know from Freetown, because we had former Nigerians, Ghanaians, Guineans, you name it. Everyone is there. So there's this rise of Pan-Africanism is here again in this century. So I'm really excited about this. As you all know, no one is taking the stance on Pan-Africanism like President Ruto of Kenya. Now, I'm telling you, Kenya, you have done so well in creating a president who is so intelligent, who is so wise, who is thinking about the future of Africa. Not, he sees beyond Kenya. And I like people like that who are actually free thinkers and have vision to unite Africa and see beyond their own country, to know that we are all one people. So well done, Kenya. I mean, I can listen to President Ruto talk over and over again. It is so wise. I will encourage anyone to please listen to his speech. Listen to his speeches in the African Union and the European Union and what he has to say. And it is not aggressive. He's just telling things that the way they are. President Ruto, first of all, what I like about him, I must say he's my favorite African leader at the moment. What I like about President Ruto is that he's putting his house in order. Okay, so he's putting Kenya in order, and also he is speaking to the African countries. He's telling them, listen, let's get ourselves together. Let's organize ourselves. so that when we speak to other nations, to the world, they will listen, they will have respect for us. Because at the moment, they're not listening, they're not respecting us. And so it wants African leaders to actually start paying their contribution towards the African Union, so that if there is a war in Africa, if things happen, we will be able to tackle that issue. We don't have to come running to the West and say, please help me, here's my begging bowl. President Ruto is saying we want respect as African leaders. We don't disrespect your leaders. What makes you think you can disrespect us? And as you all know, Paul Kagame, I've liked him for many years. He's such a wise man. He's so calm. He just tell it to the West as it is. Don't come and lecture us about democracy. If there's any people in Africa, if there's any people in the world who have fought for democracy, who have fought for their rights, it is Africans. We have to fought to be free from slavery. We have to fought for colonization. So how can you tell people who have been enslaved and colonized about democracy? You are not preaching what you're speaking. So it's like, if there's any set of people that know so well about democracy, it's Africans, because we've been enslaved, we've been colonized, so we've had the Western powers taking advantage of our raw materials, of our Africa. So Kagame just knows how to tell the truth, and just knows how to tell the Western powers, like, leave us alone. We can take care of ourselves. We can demonstrate good leadership. We don't have to apply the same method that you've applied in the Western world. We have the ability to carve our own way. We're not a copy fit. We cannot just copy what the West is doing. We have to know who we are, what our values and our culture are, and then we have to apply that in our own respective countries. So well done. There's Nana Akua-Addo, that's the president of Ghana. So he is actually studied in the United Kingdom, and I must say I'm really, really impressed with him. You know, as you know, Ghana is so rich in raw materials, gold and cocoa, and he's actually stood up to Switzerland and says, you're buying our cocoa for cheap, and then you're selling it back to us at a ridiculous amount. Our youth don't have jobs. They're dying in the Mediterranean Sea to go look for jobs in Europe. We want to create manufacturing companies in Ghana. We want to create manufacturing companies in Africa, so we can have employment opportunity for our youth. So our youth will stay in the continent so that they can rebuild the continent and be able to live in the continent. We want to develop our continent. We want to have roads. We want them to stay. We want to make the condition conducive enough for them to stay, to not just flying away or running away to Europe and dying at any means or any cost just to reach to the Western world. So I must say thank you so much, Nana. You are such a wise man, so inspirational. In a nutshell, what are African leaders saying? They said, treat us as equal partners in the world stage. We want to have a seat in the table. We want to be where the decision making is. We don't want second-hand information. And they don't want to be no more puppeteers for Western world. You can't just pull the strings and tell African leaders what to do and what they shouldn't do. We have a mind of our own. We know what's good for Africa. Hands of our raw materials, a cocoa, bauxite, you name it, gold, diamonds. We want this material. We want to be able to manufacture these things in Africa. Stop interfering in African affairs, interference in African, for instance, election, or decide who the next leadership should be. So we need that to stop African leaders asking. And also they're saying, do not lecture us in democracy. With all your democracy, you've enslaved so many brown and black people in the world. So do not lecture us. Practice what you preach. So what do African leaders want? So they want a United States of Africa. Yeah, with all the 52, 54 countries of Africa coming together, and one leader, one head of state, one currency, like an African or whatever it is, one passport to represent everyone from the continent, one language. That shouldn't be one leader. That's the same as one head of state. We have to have one language, which is the formal language that we should adopt, whether it's Swahili or Lingali, just one language. Of course, we want to be one people. So as you know, the Western world has been so long trying to downplay Africa. Like we're living in jungles, we're living on top of trees, and we have no water. Exactly what you see on like Save the Children and all these websites about donating funds to Africa. All this propaganda about making Africa look like a death trap, a death zone. But no, Africa is actually um, Africa is very developed. I mean, this, for instance, this is Nairobi, Kenya. So, and most of Africa is developed as well. And this is Luanda Bay in Angola. As you know, Angola have a lot of oil reserves and diamonds. So, this bay is actually quite beautiful for the people who've actually had to visit. How lovely it is at night time and how beautiful it is. And it's Kigali, Rwanda. Rwanda's come a long way. It's doing so great. Well done to Paul Kagame's government, and he's doing really well. So just want to say keep it up, and it's coming. It's going to emerge as the Singapore of Africa, and we're very proud. And this is Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. They're doing really well as well. The city is up to a very good standard. And yeah, just like any other place in Africa, you have the good parts and the bad parts. But there's hope and it's developing, so which is what we like to see. And then there's Accra, Ghana. Ghana is emerging as one of the most developed African countries in West Africa. So it's doing really well, and I know that most African Americans are actually relocating to Ghana and setting up businesses there, and just escaping some of the violence and racism in the US and other parts of the Western world. I'm coming back to Ghana and making Ghana home. So thanks to President Nana this for encouraging this brothers and sisters to return to the continent and come back home. Yeah, and this is Cape Town, South Africa. People are not living in jungles. South Africa, like any other country, has very good places and very bad places. And we all know South Africa, the history of apartheid for many, many years. That only came to end with the reign of Nelson Mandela. So Africans have fought and they've come a long way. So, what do you think? Should we have a one Africa, United States of Africa, with one head of state, one currency, freedom to travel and trade within Africa, one language? For me personally, I hope this come into fruition. I think this will strengthen the continent. It will take away poverty. It will take away unemployment from the youth. Because can you believe it's actually easier to travel to other countries than for Africans to travel within Africa. So for the leaders now speaking together with one voice, I am so happy that they want a united Africa, just like the forefathers' dream. And when we do get to united Africa, this national anthem should be the one for it. Okay, I know it's Tanzania, but it echoes Africa from the first verse. Thank you. Have a nice day. And listen to this national anthem.